A couple of days ago, I shared a video of the COVID-19 Public Health Response Bill being discussed in Parliament, right? And there were, it was being put under um, a heavy discussion in Parliament, and there were politicians putting it down left, right, and centre. Well, some of them were. Most of them were in favour of it, of course. But anyway, I played a video out, and I asked for all my debunking friends, those of them that might have a different point of view, to put forward their claims, put forward what they thought about it, their views, right? And some did. Some said, some put a link in, which I looked into. That was, and I looked at the link, and there was a lot of mention around how the government already had that type of authority under that they are asking for. So under the COVID-19 Public Health Response Bill, apparently it's giving police officers the ability to go into anyone's premises without a warrant, right? And so apparently, whilst we were under level 4 and level 3 of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, which was put in place as a state of national emergency, apparently it has been said that the government already had that power. So I decided, okay, let's have a look at both those things. Let's have a look at what it says under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. Excuse me. And let's have a look at what it says under the new COVID-19 Public Health Response Bill, and marry the two up and find whether or not that's true, right? Because people seem to be kicking up a big stink about this new bill, and it is interesting. I do find it interesting that they need this type of power. Not sure. They didn't have it all the time. Let's be real here. They probably did have that power under the Civil Defence Management Act, but that's coming to an end now, being in level 2, and they probably needed something to be able to stand on that gives them the right to still be able to do that once they don't have the power of entry from the Civil Defence Management Act. So looking right at it right now, here it is. We'll start with that one. Civil Defence Emergency Management Act 2002. Okay, it says it down here. Civil Defence Emergency Management Act 2002. Okay. Oops. So this bill goes back as far as then, obviously. I note that there were some sections in here too that have been amended back in 2008. So here's the content page. Looking at all of this part here, I think it's a lot of it's to do with the appointing of different directors, different roles and jobs, people within those roles, how the government will go about setting up the management group for the civil defence, right? Because even though there are managements of civil defence, there's still other roles and jobs within those roles that need to be filled when an emergency comes along. Like, there's not always people with all of these roles. They need to pull people in, and quite often from different parliament, parties. Everyone kind of has to work together in these type of situations. And I think I was talking about it today with my father-in-law. He was saying that Simon Bridges was assigned by Jacinda to be part of, or to lead, I think, a section of that management group, that civil defence management group. I'm not sure which exactly, but yeah, it was interesting. So that's what a lot of this area is about. It's just talking about how the government will go about appointing these positions and who's in charge and when to appoint this and all of those kinds of things, really. If you were a rookie prime minister and then boom, you get hit with something like COVID-19, these parts are the guidelines as to how you would approach and create a management group for this type of scenario. But going down to part 5, powers in relation to civil defence emergency management, which is what we're looking at. So I've gone through some of them here as they're already darkened. Very interesting, this one here, power of entry to obtain information in urgent cases. Had a look at that one. And in this sense, the power of entry, and we'll just quickly look at it now. This is section 78 of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act 2002. It says here that this is only in force during a state of emergency, right? Or when a state of emergency is in force, and when a director or controller or a person authorised by the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group considers that an imminent threat of an emergency exists. So obviously they're talking about a situation like what we're in now. So let's just quickly look at it, because it talks about, where is it, in section 2, that if this section applies, a district court judge may, by warrant, authorise any constable to enter and search any premises, not being a dwelling house, to obtain information. So they can't just go into anyone's dwelling house, okay? Especially not to obtain information, okay? If satisfied on oath by the director, the controller, or a person authorised by Civil Defence Management Group, okay? So yeah, so anyway, that was, I found very interesting. So the power of entry onto any premises apart from a dwelling house, they need a warrant under the Civil Defence Act, which was quite interesting, I found. Okay, but that's for obtaining information. It says here, to obtain information. I'm not sure exactly, in urgent cases, I'm not sure exactly what that would look like. I mean, I don't have any real urgent information in my household. However, there might, if my neighbour was to knock me in and say, Charles is throwing a party with more than 100 people, or, you know, with more than his bubble, if we were at level 4, maybe there's some information in my house or in my premises that they need to come and find. But they couldn't do that anyway, because in this it says not being a dwelling house. Okay, it's another building, and even still they have to by a warrant. Okay, a district court judge may by warrant authorize. So there you go. That's on entry. But then as we go down further, it says here entry on premises. So this is this is section 87, right? This isn't to obtain information. This is just to come into somebody's premises, right? So this is section 87. Okay, again, if an emergency is in force, a controller or a constable, that's a police officer, or any person, I'm sure a controller must be someone higher rank, or any person acting under the authority of those two people may enter on, and if necessary, break into any premises or place within the area or district in respect of which the state of emergency is in force, which is the whole of Aotearoa New Zealand during that time, right? If he or she, this is the interesting part, if he or she believes on reasonable ground that the action is necessary for. So that's interesting right there. If he or she believes on reasonable grounds right? That the action is necessary. So my belief of what I feel is a reasonable ground might be different to old Constable Noon over here, right? So that's quite broad in a sense when you think about it. But it doesn't say anything about a warrant. So I guess what people have been saying is right. During a Civil Defence Emergency Management Act 2002, when that's enforced, like at level 4, they did have the power to come in. Controller or constable, so police had the power to do it. But here's their reasons, and their only reasons was to either save a life, preventing injury, or rescuing and removing injured or endangered persons, right? Or B, permitting or facilitating the carrying out of any urgent measure for the relief of suffering or distress. So if they find someone might be suffering or in distress, right, in my household, they might choose to come in. They might choose to come into my house. So they did have the power. It states that very clear here. Although, for reasons of saving lives, preventing injury, rescuing, removing, or to relieve suffering and distress. Now, those are very important key components there to this, because to relieve suffering or distress, that could look different in many ways. Like, in order to relieve suffering and stress for some people might mean causing a bit of suffering and stress, right? Especially if they're having to break into, they have that, they have the ability to, it says it there, break into, if necessary, break into any premises or place. Okay? So they did have that power. It says it straight there. Which, okay, point made. But that's good. Let's look at it now on the other side. Let's have a look at the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act 2020. Right? Enforcement. Here we go. Powers of entry. Section 20. Right? So, an enforcement officer may enter without a warrant any land, building, craft, vehicle, place, or thing if they have reasonable grounds to believe. Here we go again, reasonable grounds to believe. But this time they've added extra settings. We've got land, people. We've got a building. We've got craft. Oh, I wonder what kind of craft they could be. Be like a, what do you call those things that float on the land, but they're not quite a boat? Freaking, I forget something. I forget what their name is. Anyway, yeah, vehicles or a place, just to put it out there, or a thing even. Wowzers, they went all out in this bill. So, if they have reasonable grounds to believe that a person is failing to comply with any aspect of a Section 11 order. So, just as a shortcut, Section 11 order is state of emergency. Well, not state of emergency. Yeah, it's the rules, the orders that we are currently under at whatever level we're under, right? So we're at level 2 now. We've got orders, right, to keep distancing, wash your hands, wash your balls, whatever it is. Anyway, so that's what they mean by aspects of Section 11. You can look that up yourself. I'll leave the link of this as well in my post when I post this. So yeah. Anyway, However, subsection 1 does not apply to a private dwelling house. So they can't just enter in without a warrant to a private dwelling house. I would imagine that my house is a private dwelling house, because it's a house, it is a dwelling, and it's private. So my understanding is they may not be able to come in on my property because subsection 1 does not apply. Depends what's in subsection 1. Well, subsection 1 is that they may enter without a warrant. There's subsection 1 right there. Case closed. Anyway, number 3. A constable may enter a private dwelling house without warrant only if they have reasonable grounds to believe. There it is again, reasonable grounds. As I've mentioned before, reasonable grounds is quite a broad thing. My reasonable grounds to believe could be different to old Johnny over here, right? Very, very broad, too broad. That people have gathered there in contravention of section 11, which is the order, right? Whatever our rules are currently at the moment. An entry is necessary for the purpose of giving a direction under section 21. So section 21 from the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, yeah, is what they're talking about. Number 4, a constable exercising a power, and this is where it got really interesting for me, okay? Because they didn't have to do this in the Management Act 2002, right? So they have to write a report. Any constable that exercises the warrantless entry power under the section must provide here it is, who exercises a warrantless entry power under the section must provide a written report on the exercise of that power to the commissioner or a police employee designated to receive reports of that kind by the commissioner as soon as practicable after exercising the power. So as soon as they can, after they've exercised the power and gone in and smashed everybody up, whatever they're doing, they have to write a report about it. So not only do they get to come in and whip your ass, but they can also go home and write about it later on. I'm just joking. Anyway, moving on. Section 6. Any enforcement officer other than a constable who exercises a warrantless empowerment, so they too have to write a report on the exercise. Okay, so they actually have to report their reasons. It says down here, a report referred in a subsection 5 or 6 must contain. So this is what they must have in their report: a short summary of the circumstances surrounding the exercise of the power and the reason or reasons why the power needed to be exercised. Yeah, I find that interesting that they have to write a report, but they don't have to do that under the Civil Defence Management Act. There might be a sneaky reason for that. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe to keep a record, keep their bums clean, perhaps. I don't know. So there it is. They have to write a report, a description of any other action undertaken. All right, that's if they have, any other action. So what is that? If they have to come in and then they end up having to draw guns, they've got to write a report about it. Now check this out. This kind of freaked me out a bit, because I'm like, what? Why have they put that in there out of everything else? I don't understand. Section 8. If a marae is entered under subsection 1, the person exercising the power must also send a copy of the report referred to in subsection 5 or 6, as the case may be, to the committee of the relevant marae. So they've got to send a report to the current marae. What do these people have against marae, man? Why don't they have to send a report to me if they bust into my house? They've got to send one to the commissioner, right? Or to anyone designated to receive reports by the Commissioner. But if they come in and bust my ass up without a warrant, exercising a warrantless entry power under this section, they don't got to send me a report. But if they go and do that on a marae, they've got to send a report to the committee of that relevant marae. Okay, that's a little interesting. But yeah, okay. Well, there's a little fun fact for you. So there it is. That's what power of entry looks like under both the two. I can see now why people are saying that, because I did see some people saying that the power of entry under public health response there's actually more restrictions apparently than the other one. I don't know. I would tend to think that in this case there's probably less restriction if you really look at it deeply. Because what they're saying here is that a constable can come in without any warrant. And the other one we saw, they needed a warrant just to come into your house to obtain information. Right? There was sections 80 in the civil defence here, which talked about breaking in if necessary. But that was only to saving life, preventing injury. They're only talking about if someone was like abducted or something, right? And held as a hostage, right? They don't really have, and that's based on their belief on reasonable grounds that the action is necessary. I don't know if the action is necessary to come into your house. Well, I guess it will be to save lives, wouldn't it? Under COVID-19, right? To prevent injury, prevent the spread. We need to come into your house and take your child, or take you out because you need to be quarantined, or whatever the case may be. I guess they did have, they still kind of do have that power there. But then, funnily enough, in section, and I might be talking and raving on here, but I still find this interesting, in section 78, as we read earlier, it says that a district court judge may by warrant authorize any constable to enter. So they need a warrant just to come in to obtain information. So to obtain information, they need a warrant. But to come in and kick your ass under the Civil Defence Act, they don't necessarily need a warrant, which is interesting. And then here, they don't need a warrant, right? And they can come not only to your house, but to your land, to your building, to your craft, to your vehicle, to your place, or to your thing, whatever that is, and exercise whatever. It doesn't actually give you an understanding of what that looks like. See, on this one it does. Saving life, preventing injury, rescuing, rah, 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 rah. But here, it just says, reasonable grounds to believe that a person is failing to comply with any aspect of Section 11. So this bill is strictly to continue the outgoing laws around COVID-19. This bill was more about saving lives, preventing, injuring, rescuing, removing endangered persons, or permitting, facilitating, carrying out, so it was I feel like this one, even though they didn't need a warrant, it was very clear what they had to come in to do, why they were doing it, right? On the grounds of actions, if necessary, for saving a life, preventing injury. Over here, doesn't say a heck of a lot in terms of what they're coming to exercise, right? Apart from the contravention of a Section 11 order. So if someone is not following that law of order under Section 11, they can come in. But it doesn't tell you exactly what they do. Under the section must provide, it just says they've got to write a report afterwards, so they could come in and do anything. It doesn't give you specific grounds on what they're able to do when they come in. Civil defence does. At least tells you on which grounds and actions that action is necessary. Over here it doesn't say that. It doesn't tell you that. It just tells you they've got to write a report to the commissioner, and if they're going on a blimmin' marae out of every blimmin' thing, they have to write to the committee of the relevant marae. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. But I might have found a loophole there. If you remember, I said earlier, it says, however, Section 1 does not apply to a private dwelling house. Well, if you class, this is private land. I own this land here. This is my land, right? And I have a dwelling house on this land. It's a private dwelling house. So a constable cannot come in here under Section 1 to enforce entry without a warrant. In my mind. So I might have found the loophole there. So if some police come and try and knock on your door and you own the place, if you're renting, sorry, but if you own the dwelling house, it clearly states here that this does not apply. Section 1 does not apply. Where they may enter without a warrant. Any land, building, craft, vehicle. It doesn't apply under Section 1 to a private dwelling house. That's how I'm reading it. Anyway, very interesting. So there you go. If someone comes knocking at your door, police, and they're forcing entry, you tell them. Under the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act, Section 2, you are not authorised to come onto this private dwelling house. Section 1 does not apply. Remember that, folks. It doesn't apply. But I'm really interested to see that they have to write to marae. Anyway, I've been carrying on and on. So there you have it. You can do your own maths around this. I'll leave the link as well so you guys can go on and look at it yourselves. But there's the difference. Right, a lot more in this bill, and not a lot in terms of what they can exercise during a warrantless entry. They're basically open for frickin' anything, really. So that is the difference in my view. With the Civil Defence Act, it stipulates what their reasons are for. Okay. Still, they have the power to believe on what those grounds look like, but it states very clearly what they're there to do. And this one here doesn't say that. It just says they can come in and bust you up, but also they have to write a report about it as well to their commissioner. I guess that might be just to save their butts, safety kind of thing. Because it clearly, that tells you right there that the fact and the reason that they have to write a report about it tells you that it's a lot more in this bill than in the civil defence. So there's the proof right there, actually, when you think about it. Anyway, guys, I'll leave this link on this post that I've posted here on Facebook. Hopefully that kind of spells out the difference. You might find some more differences yourself. Yeah, some interesting things there. But don't forget that little thing there that I came up with that I've pointed out. They can't come to your private dwelling house and use and enforce section number 1 because it does not apply to a private dwelling house. Remember that when they come knocking on the door on the house that you own. As I said, if you're renting or you're living with your auntie, well, sorry, your ass is theirs. Anyway, have a good night. And sorry this video took ages, but it was a big topic, and it still is. I probably didn't even cover what I was meant to, but I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Yeah, good studying. Keep thinking. Don't, just because people like to debunk your thoughts and your opinions, don't let that stop you from having a voice. You still have a voice, you're still able to exercise that voice, and just because other people don't agree with you or look at you in a funny way, even if it's your mum or your dad, it doesn't matter. You as a person, as a human being, have a place on this earth to exercise the same opportunities that everybody else has. Don't let anyone trying to debunk you, trying to make you look silly, trying to whatever. Stay real, stay awake, but stay digging. Don't just stop because somebody made you feel like what your views are is that your views are wrong. Because you're bigger than that. All right. Cheers, guys. Take it easy, and we'll see you in the next round. Next time it's going to be a song. All right. Choo choo.